Good evening, everybody. I am Dr. Krishnanand, Professor and Head of Oral Pathology, Dayanand Sagar College of Dental Sciences. And I, with my colleague, Dr. Veena Pai, Reader, Department of Conservative Dentistry, Dayanand Sagar College of Dental Sciences, will be moderating today's interesting and important training session for dental, medical, and Ayurvedic fraternity. As we all know and understand, we are in the midst of an unprecedented health crisis, the corona pandemic. We have been stretched to the limits of our health facilities not once, but twice in a span of just 1 year. From March of 2020 till today, India has recorded almost 17 million cases, and around 1.3 million of these cases are in our state alone. The second wave, which started around the end of February, has been particularly severe and punishing. Reasons for which may vary from multiple mutations of the virus, making it more virulent, to the complacency that seems to have set in amongst our people, which has made all of us let our guard down in one way or the other. The entire country is reeling under the onslaught of the virus, and Karnataka is not an exception at all, with Bangalore, in fact, being its epicenter. According to official figures by the government of Karnataka, yesterday the figure stands at almost 30,000 new cases in Karnataka, out of which almost 18,000 have been reported in Bangalore itself. Understandably, in this situation, all our healthcare workers, starting from doctors in hospitals to all the support staff, have been stretched and been working round the clock to help all of us. And to say that they have been overworked would be a big understatement. In these trying times, all of us need to do our bit to help our colleagues in any possible way. With this in mind, the NMO unit of my college, under its principal, Dr. Hemant, with Sri Dayanandji's help, support, decided to initiate a training session in teletriaging that could be of great help to patients who just need initial consultation at home. And it would also help in taking a lot of burden off our already overworked doctor colleagues. With this in mind, we put together a team of eminent doctors, all in the forefront of our state's fight against COVID in their own fields and specialties. They will, in the course of this session, guide all of us present here on how to talk, guide, and even reassure patients who require medical assistance of any kind related to COVID. I would again take this opportunity to invite and thank Sri Devanandji, an ardent RSS Karyakarta who has also been a public relations officer to the RSS for this program. A very warm welcome to you, sir. Thank you for all your support. With this, I would request Dr. Veena to take over in introducing our eminent panelists to the gathering for the session to continue. Dr. Veena, please take over. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It's not a pleasant time for the world. The only good things are doctors who aren't tired fighting for their lives, where their own relatives and kin can't help them. With gratitude to the warriors, I would like to introduce the speakers, or you can say people who would make us also a part of the fight against the virus. Dr. Ravindra Mehta, Chief of Critical Care and Consultant Pulmonologist and Sleep Medicine Specialist at Apollo Hospital, Jayanagar. Sir is certified through American Board for Pulmonary Medicine, Interventional Pulmonologist, Critical Care Medicine, Sleep Disorder Medicine, and Internal Medicines. All these are something which is required now for the country. Dr. Chandrasekhar, Professor and Head, Intensive Care Institute of Gastroenterology and Organ Transplant. He has mentored many intensive care specialists across the country. He has authored many books on intensive care too. Dr. Ramesh Masti, Professor and of Community Medicine, KIMS, Bangalore. Dr. Ranganath, Professor and Head, Department of Community Medicine, BMC. He has been greatly involved in the vaccination drive, which is required to curb the virus right now. Dr. Nagesh, Surgical Gastroenterologist, Director, Institute of Gastroenterologist and Organ Transplant. He was the one who established dedicated liver and organ transplant institute, first of its kind in government sector. We welcome you all here, sir. Being a part of Teletriaging Group Step 1 since last year, I have realized this is the time to give strength to the affected, give relief to the frontline warrior by reducing their load through guiding the home isolation patients rightly. Over to you, Dr. Mehta, Senior Consultant, Apollo Hospitals, to give us light on this topic, sir.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Veena, and everybody, and thank you for calling us in this, as you said, unusual but horrific situation where we are looking at mayhem going to some sort of unusual holocaust never seen before. And it's heartening to see in the midst of all this, we're trying to at least put all our resources together at every level to do something. And I think with this, we should get over if such a huge marshalling of resources happens. Now, the whole thing was we need to have an idea of what to equip the doctors with who are trying to help in this venture. So I think I will leave my colleagues to also comment on this, but our thoughts were that we should give them some sort of a template where we have a small information FAQ sort of thing, where they understand the disease themselves. The good part is that the massive literature of COVID can be summarized very shortly into a page or two of concrete ground level actual understanding, which is going to help anybody who has any sort of medical background to first of all assess, help, and at least triage the patient who is now reaching out to you. So that little information can go out, which is going to summarize whatever has happened in the last 1 year, and it's COVID 2021 about COVID-19. So that is one thing. The second is, depending on the scope which is decided by my co-panelists and the planners, we can then come out with a checklist also, which can also be used similarly to both understand the disease, which means that when the patients call, we will have symptomatology, we will have a triage, and we will have the next plan towards what is to be done. So both of them can be prepared, circulated. A training session can be done, which, as I said, is not difficult. And after which the doctors can be also avail of people who are available later for any sort of more complex situation, because obviously no checklist or no plan can cover every contingency. And such patients can always be told that we will get back to you and so on, or can be referred to the next level, which is also available when we try to put this into place. So these are the two preliminary thoughts. We have been troubleshooting that very rapidly in the last few hours with each other. And so if this is acceptable as a rollout plan, then that can be accordingly done. Whether it's done now or done later is the question to be answered. This is what I have to say, and I welcome my colleague panelists, Dr. Chandrasekhar and Dr. Nagesh and others, to give their thoughts also. Veena, Dr. Krishnan, back to you for this.
Dr. Chandrasekhar, we welcome you, sir, to continue on the discussion.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi Mehta, my senior colleague and my good friend. As he said, this is not very difficult, and this is a pandemic, and as he said, it's kind of a scary situation. So all the hands on the deck is what is the order of the hour now. So we do really thank and welcome this initiative in the sense that the hospitals are so pressurized, and many patients who don't require to come to the hospitals are coming and occupying some beds. At least, though we are trying to triage and keep them out, an initiative like this probably would avoid those patients and coming to the hospital, and every bed is given to a patient who really deserves to be in a hospital. This we have been telling from last year. The the whole key to the control of this pandemic is to keep about 80 to 90% of asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic patients away from the hospital. This is the whole idea. So in that direction, a training of this sort achieves a great significance in the sense it's a pandemic, and the healthcare is usually not, the health system is not built to take care of a pandemic. We have the hospitals, we have the training only to look after the patients at a normal care. So we are also at ends in the pandemic, and we are also struggling. So we require doctors, Ayurvedic doctors, dental doctors who have the skill, who can manage the asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic patients at home or in COVID care centers, and keep the hospital only for the sick, so that the sick patients get to the hospital beds and we are able to provide good care and the mortality comes down. So in that direction, I feel this is a good initiative. I hope we'll be able to put across some concrete things so that so the doctors who are working on the ground level take something out of this talk and try to manage some mildly or asymptomatic patients at home level or in the COVID care centers. The new guidelines say that there should be a 10-day isolation, 7-day home quarantine, and in the last 3 days, if the patient is asymptomatic, and there is no need to prove that the patient is negative. This is important because testing also is getting strained. Everybody who is COVID positive goes and wants to prove to himself or to the many times in the apartments, we are finding this difficulty. When we say we don't require, they say we can't allow the maid into your house. So they go and get the testing done. So a lot of logistical issues are there. There is a state guideline which says that on the 8th, 9th, 10th day of isolation, if somebody is asymptomatic, there is no need to go and test himself and prove that he is negative. So that is what the state guideline says. Remember that. And just to tell you about the time frame or the timeline, when are the days when we have to be careful? From the onset of fever or the symptoms, somewhere around 5th or 6th day or the end of the first week is when the patient starts having dyspnea. And somewhere around 10th, 11th day is when the patient is going to get into really trouble. So this is the phase when you are looking after somebody at home, not from the day of testing. You always remember this is the day of symptomatology beginning. On the end of the first week is when you have to be careful. This is when the patients really get sick. So this is where the next 3-4 days is where you have to be careful. If somebody crosses about 10-12 days, probably they don't get sick. So, but though we say that 10 days of isolation is enough, we have seen in the first wave and also in the second wave now, if the patients are good in the first 8-9 days, then they are not going to have any problem. If patients on the 5th, 6th day start misbehaving with decreasing the saturation, finding it difficult to breathe, too much of cough, then he says he's feeling tired, that is when these patients have to be carefully monitored. So remember this timeline that around 5th, 6th day is when the trouble starts. When somebody clears 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th day comfortably holding on good saturations, most of them do well. So that's what I want you to remember, the timeline of the disease. And another thing is, what you have to understand is there are 3 stages to this. One is the viral response or a viral replication phase, which is in the first 5-6 days to the first week, I would say. Then the immune system starts trying to control the virus. If the immune system is dysregulated, then the patient becomes sick and dies. The problem with this is we don't know how to identify which patient is going to go for an immune dysregulation. We can't identify when on the first day, second day, unless the patient starts deteriorating, we presume that the patient has gone into a misfiring immune system. That's what kills the patient. Most of the patients die because of a misfiring immune system. And we don't have signs to identify on the day one which patient is going to have a misfiring immune system. That's the difficulty. Though we know a set of patients who are prone to having higher mortality, but we can't identify every patient who's going to die. That's another difficulty with this. And if the immune system is well regulated, then the patient recovers. This happens in the course of first 5 to 10 days when the immune system and the pulmonary interaction takes place, where the viral replication phase. So this is important to understand because some medications are to be avoided in the viral response time phase, and some medications have to be only used in the hyperinflation phase, like a IL-6 inhibitor. There is no point in going and giving it in a viral replication phase because it's going to suppress your immunity and patient is going to get sick. Whereas if you look at the remdesivir also, there is a small window where the patient is to be on oxygen, not very sick, is the patients who do well on remdesivir. Not that every patient given remdesivir is going to do good. In fact, there is evidence that WHO has withdrawn remdesivir, saying that it doesn't work. Though in our country we have been continuously using, and all of us, Dr. Mehta also has published a paper to this effect. We agree that it decreases the severity, and we feel using remdesivir in that pulmonary phase is going to decrease the pulmonary fibrosis and lead to a better recovery. But trying to give remdesivir when the patient is very sick on a ventilator is not going to work. And in fact, being there is a shortage of remdesivir, every patient should not be offered a remdesivir. There is a small window for remdesivir usage because Dr. Mehta would agree with me that every day almost 50% of our time is going in saying no to beds and remdesivir and IL-6 inhibitors. So that has to be left to the treating doctors in the hospital, and trying to give every patient, even in the milder phases or in the patients who are really sick with a very sick score, and trying to use up remdesivir is not the way forward. That is something that you have to remember. And always remember, respiratory support or ventilator or oxygen is not a treatment for COVID-19. It's just a lung support system. That's something that has to be kept in mind. As I said, some factors are that make the patient really more prone for death are age, comorbidities. Comorbidities in this: diabetes, hypertension, obesity, smoking, malignancy, and these are some of the factors that have to be factored in. Then physiological result: if somebody is not physically very strong, they tend to have a higher chance of death. So organ involvement, if somebody presents with more than one organ involvement, or they come very, very sick to the hospital, then the chances of death is more. These are some of the factors you have to remember, because when you are treating somebody at home, if he is elderly, has many comorbidities, then are very obese, then you tend to have to keep a closer watch. That's what is the bottom line I want you to understand. One is the timeline. Always remember the timeline. And then most of the patients die because of a dysregulated immune system, or a misfiring immune system is what kills the patient. And some factors that we have found out that age, comorbidities, physiological reserve, and severity on admission are some of the factors. There's a lot of comorbidities. Kindly monitor those patients more closely. So this is something most of you face, isn't it? Somebody calls up and says that you are a doctor, that I have a 55-year-old uncle who is having fever and cough. So what is your advice? This is what generally somebody would call and ask you, isn't it? So the first thing is you would advise him to get tested. So you always have to remember that a RT-PCR test is about 70 to 80% sensitive, and a rapid antigen test is only about 50% sensitive. Meaning, if the symptomatology is there, if somebody says I have a loss of smell and taste, but your rat test comes negative, I would say always consider them positive and keep them in isolation and treat them like a COVID. Because it's a pandemic, you allow them to roam around, he's going to spread the infection. I have seen a lot of patients who are vaccinated are not being picked up in RT-PCR. and after 3-4 days, the second RT-PCR is coming positive. So if the symptomatology is there, our advice would be always consider them for next 10 days that they are COVID positive. Then how do you manage him at home till the result comes? This is another question. Sometimes you send a RT-PCR, they take 2 to 3 days. So what are you going to do with these guys? Are you going to say go to the hospital? Are you going to say what? How do you know that this patient is okay to be at home? So our advice would be always ask them to monitor their SpO2s and their temperature. If their SpO2s on room air is anything more than 95, then they are good to stay at home. This you can remember, anything more than 95 on room air, you can say them that they are stable or they can be safe at home. And some 2-3 factors that we have seen is when home monitoring is, they just put the pulse oximeter and say in the morning it was 99, in the evening it is 91. It scares us. They just don't have the patience to keep till the machine calibrates and you get a stable value. So our advice is tell them, check it for a minute, don't move the hand, and also how to put it. The light has to be through the nail. I put a photograph for you to hear, and sometimes nail polish doesn't give a good reading. So always factor this, and you can say this is what you have to monitor. As long as somebody's SpO2 is more than 95 on room air, you can say that he can be at home. And another thing you can do is you can do a WhatsApp call and look at the patient. So what to look at, I'll tell you in my subsequent lecture. But these are the 3 things I would advise. Look at the temperature, look at the saturations, and you tell him how to put the pulse oximeter. And if the saturations are more than 95 on room air, patient can stay at home. If he says that his saturation is 96, respiratory rate is 98, and heart rate is 16, I think 116, probably this patient can stay at home. This is what we want. Almost 80 to 90% of the patients fit into this bracket, and you are the guys who can manage this. If you take up this load, meaning you are taking up 90% of the load, we will be comfortable in managing the next 15% of the patients who are really sick, who are going to get into the hospital and who require to be in the hospital in the first place, and then we can produce a better results. So it's a kind of an appeal to the community that is hearing this lecture, that kindly everybody who gets across a patient, don't get scared, don't try to refer it to the patient. It's very simple. This is what you have to remember. In the saturation more than 95 on room air, it is good to stay at home. Remember that. Then what do you advise the patient and what do you monitor in the next 10 days? Or as I said, on the 5th, 6th day, what are you going to monitor? What is your advice? So this is what. How do I know when the patient is safe to be monitored at home? What are the signs that tell me the patient is getting sick and requires to go to a COVID care center or a hospital? This is the next question, isn't it? If you understand and have confidence in this, I think you will be able to manage the patients. I'll try to make it simple so that you have simple, as Dr. Mehta said, a simple template at the ground level so that you can manage most of your patients very, 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 very comfortably at home. And all these patients are scared because of too much of negative publicity being put up by the electronic and WhatsApp. So all these patients requires a WhatsApp call and a very good counseling. One good counseling, the patient settle down and they become very comfortable. So what is your advice? There is no drugs. There is no drugs. The only drug that at this stage we would advise is paracetamol of 650 milligrams to up till a gram every 6th hour. If the fever doesn't, I've seen that sometimes fevers don't subside with paracetamol, then you can give a Brufen 400 milligrams twice daily. But be aware that in elderly patients, hypertensives, giving Brufen for 10 days BD would not be advisable. For a day or 2, it's okay. And then you can ask them to eat very good food, drink a lot of fluids to a tune of 1.5 because they have fever and it's summer, they're going to sweat a lot. And if they not take a lot of fluid, then the other complications set in. We have seen that we tend to see a lot of kidney problems when they come with low volume in the circulation. So we advise that these patients take up to 1.5 liters per day. And this is very commonly asked, can I eat a non-vegetarian? There is no restriction to diet. And what you have to tell is monitor SpO2 and temperature fourth hourly. As I've said, as long as your SpO2 is more than 95 on room air, it's good to stay at home. And this has been commonly added, saying that this increases your immunity, but there is no great evidence, but there is no harm also. So zinc 50 milligrams twice daily or once daily, vitamin C and vitamin D can be added up. And then it's all like symptomatology. If somebody says he has cough, you can add up a cough syrup. If he says he has a dry nose or a blocked nose, a Nasevion drops, or a running nose, a Montelukast, any vomiting, it's all symptomatology from here onwards. There is nothing specific. We have seen a lot of polypharmacy being written, azithromycin, doxycycline, ivermectin, steroids for all asymptomatic patients. It's not, nothing is proven, and we have seen with so much of medication, patients get tired, not because of the disease, because of so much of medication. At this stage, only symptomatic treatment is what we would advise. There is no evidence to any medication at this point of time. And saltwater gargle, steam inhalation has been told, and the patients, it has become a kind of a written in newspapers. Whether you ask, whether you tell or not, they're going to do it, and they can have a bath every day. And this is very important. Any pre-existing disease, there is absolutely no need to stop any medication. All the medication, including blood thinners, have to be continued unless we as a medical professional say for some other reason that these have to be stopped. Hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, all medications have to be continued. So now let us just move it across. On day one, if the patient has a saturation of 96 with a heart rate of 84, it's good to go. There is nothing to worry. On day 4, do you ask for a chest X-ray, CT chest, or a blood test? When a patient is having such a good saturation, there is no need to do anything. Because if you ask them to go out and get a test, they are going to go in an auto, go in a taxi. They are going to take 2-3 people driving. So the infection spreads. When patient is stable at home, kindly advise them to stay at home. There is no need to do any blood test, any chest X-rays, any CT scans on patients who are stable, who have a saturation of more than 95, 96 on room air, comfortable, no requirement, it's not required at all. But if the patient do insist, I think you can do a web call and look at them. If the patient is comfortable, no difficulty in breathing, when you see the patient doesn't use any accessory muscles, is not trying to pull too much air, his respiratory rate is more than 25, his nasal flaring is there, probably that patient requires to go on oxygen or requires to go to the COVID care center. If the patient is comfortable, when you look at him, is comfortable, is able to talk to you without taking a breath, all this tells you that the patient is comfortable. Many people simply complain and say, I'm feeling uncomfortable, because most of it is because of they get scared, being isolated and with too much negative publicity. So my advice is, whenever patients say that they're not comfortable, kindly make a video call, make a judgment. If you feel the patient is comfortable, you can counsel them. Most of them do settle down. On day 2, if the saturation is 95, from 96 it has become 95, still the patient is comfortable, doesn't have any usage of accessory muscles or nasal flaring, or is not drawing huge breaths, respiratory rate is not very high, you can tend to hold. Probably patient has some lung changes, but still doesn't require anything to be done, because there is nothing we can offer at this stage. And most of them generally settle down with this, with only what medication I have prescribed. They don't require anything beyond that. Now on day 5, the saturation drops to 94 or 93, but still the patient is comfortable. Probably at this stage you can try to get them. But still, if the patient is very, very comfortable, you can hold these patients in the home. Or if the patient becomes uncomfortable, started sweating, starts using accessory muscles, drawing too much air, is struggling, he says, I'm fatigued, I can't breathe, the respiratory rate is more than 25, probably then you have to shift him to a COVID care center. So what the bottom line, what I want you to understand is, look at him clinically, make a judgment, look at the saturations. If he is comfortable, a saturation of 1 or 2 change in a span of 8-9 days, as long as the patient is comfortable, doesn't require to go to the hospital. Unless the patient starts dropping the saturation from 96 to 91 in 2 days, is when you have to be alert. A small fluctuation can happen because the lung may be involved, but they tend to do well. If somebody's saturation drops by about 7th day, 8th day by 1 or 2, but patient is very, very comfortable, no fever, no cough, patient can be at home. At this, if the patient is uncomfortable with these saturations, this is the time when you can call for chest X-ray, blood test, and then RA-HRCT, and then look at it. My advice is, if somebody on 6-7 days starts dropping a saturation, you can start a dexamethasone of 6 milligrams OD. This is when the immune dysregulation sets in. So we are trying to control that at that point, and these are the patients who have to be shifted if the alarm markers are abnormal and chest X-ray or the CT scan shows abnormality. You have to shift them to a COVID care center. If the patients are comfortable, no fever, no cough, very, very comfortable, a saturation drop of 1 or 2 can be managed at home. Don't get scared because there are no beds. Even if you ask them to get into the hospitals, it's not easy. So only the sickest of sick patients have to be shifted to the hospital till we upgrade the number of beds in the hospital. So,
sorry to interrupt, sir.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know that can we give dexamethasone to the patient who is diabetic?
Yeah,
can we start it?
It can be done, but only thing is you have to look at the sugars carefully.
Okay, what if it is high? It is like in 400s or something. Then can we give it or not?
If you feel that if your C-reactive protein is more than 75,
okay,
if your ferritins are more than 1000, that is when you have to start a dexamethasone. But you have to keep a watch on the sugars. You can go in for a escalation of anti-diabetic drugs or a short-acting insulin with a pen which can be injected. You can consult a internal physician or his own diabetologist who can advise on that front.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Somebody to the hospital at that level. So next 3-4 slides, I'll just end up. The COVID care centers, as I've said, any patient who has a saturation of less than 93 on room air, and that drop has occurred very, very fast, and the patient is uncomfortable. Patient says he finds it difficult to breathe. He is using his accessory muscles. When you make a video call and see, you feel that he is tired. He is using all his neck muscles. He is trying to draw in too much air. When you ask him to breathe and count this respiratory rate, it is more than 25, 30. Those are the patients who should not be at home. You should send them to a COVID care center where oxygen has to go in. If it is, I would advise, if the patients are young or if the deterioration is not very fast, they can go to a COVID center. If the patients are elderly and the deterioration has occurred very, very fast, kindly refer them to a hospital directly. So these are some of the other guidelines that the state government has put up, that the fever is more than 38 degrees or 104 for more than 24 hours. There is mental confusion or inability. Then any chest pain or developing discoloration of the lips and face is when the patients either have to go for a COVID care center or a hospital. As I said, always look at the patient, how fast the deterioration has occurred. If the deterioration is very fast, you should directly get into the hospital. Don't shift such patients into COVID care, because we have seen a lot of patients going to 10 places and then coming so sick to the hospital. We take them in, intubate them, within 2-3 days they die. We also we also feel unhappy, the mortality rates go up. So at the ground level, remember, if the deterioration is fast and the comorbidities are more elderly and then no good physiological result, they should go to the hospital directly. So these are the oxygen devices that are available. Of the last 3, the HFNC, NIV, and lung protective ventilation can only be done in a hospital setting. These are not to be done in a COVID care center. What we would expect in a COVID care center is a nasal prongs or a mask or a non-rebreathing mask. The only thing I want all of you to remember, some small aspects in this. There is a very, very acute shortage of oxygen. So when you are using nasal prongs, don't use anything more than 5 liters. It is not be helpful. Once the reservoir from the nose to the pharynx is filled with oxygen, this has no external reservoir. So giving more than 5 liters is not going to increase your FiO2. So when you put a nasal prong, don't use more than 5 liters. You can use from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And maximum FiO2 you can give is 30 to 40%. Then if you are using a mask, don't use more than 10 liters. In a non-rebreathing mask, you can use up till 15 liters, where you can give 90% of FiO2, here about 60%, here 30 to 40%. Why I am saying this is, if you put a nasal prong and use it up till 15 liters, that 10 liters is going to go waste. Whereas 3 patients on nasal prong can be made to survive. So you should know the oxygen delivery device and how much oxygen you have to use and what are the FiO2s you can generate. This is important because when you see a SpO2 in a COVID care center, you always relate your SpO2 to FiO2, meaning if somebody is on a nasal prong and is saturating at 98, that means he's only getting 40%. If somebody is on a non-rebreathing mask with 15 liters, he's saturating at 93. This guy is much, much sicker because he's getting 90% of FiO2. So you should always, in a COVID care center, always relate your SpO2 to FiO2. And the rule of thumb is every liter of oxygen adds up 4%, about 21%, which is already there in the atmosphere. So you can roughly remember like that, but this is the limitation. This can be pushed up to 100 liters also. So the bottom line is only 3 devices you have that you can use in the COVID care center or in your clinics. Also, if some dental clinics, dental medical colleges are equipped with liquid oxygen, where you can put the patients on a dental chair very much. And if you are using these devices, only 3 devices, these are the flow rates, these are the FiO2s generated. You remember that you can save patients. Most of the patients who come to the hospital also requiring oxygen, about 85% of the patients can be managed with only 3 devices. Only about 15% get sick, even in the hospital. So again, a dental college, a Ayurvedic college, which has oxygen can save patients. Remember that. So you don't require to send it. Only thing is put a oxygen and you know how much to give and what is the FiO2 being delivered. And you can quantify the patient, how sick he is without having anything, without doing a ABG also, you can quantify the PF ratio, or we call it as SpO2 FiO2 ratio. This is for all the doctors. Remember, you can divide your SpO2 by your FiO2 generated. I have said its flow is different. See, you should not confuse this. This is the flow in liters, what we said. This is the FiO2 we generate. So you have to remember, flow is different, FiO2 is different. When you divide your SpO2 by FiO2, you get a ratio, you get a value. And if the value is anything less than 200, remember this, 150 or near anything less than 150 has to go to the hospital. Don't keep any patient with a SpO2 FiO2 ratio of less than 150 in COVID care centers, because these patients are going to go sick and deteriorate. Anything beyond 150, I would say 200, because it's a pandemic. I have pushed the line to 150. Anything around 150 and below, you kindly shift the patient to a hospital. This is how you calculate. This is a simple calculation. You don't require anything. You don't require ABG. You don't require. If you know what is the FiO2 and if you know the SpO2, which can be got in by a pulse oximeter, you can quantify whether the patient has mild ARDS, moderate ARDS, or a severe ARDS. I have put up the readings here for you to understand. And
sir, can I ask a question here?
Please, please.
If with the standard cylinder that's available in the market,
Yeah.
if it comes with a mask, and we have one in the clinic, I don't exactly know how many liters it is. We fortunately didn't have to use it ever. And if we are giving 5 to 10 liters, how long does it come for?
The big cylinder D type, what we use in the hospital is about 7,000 liters.
Okay.
The smaller ones, I'm not very sure about the value. It can be Googled and found out. It should be
Okay.
around 2,000 to 3,000 smaller ones. But that can save a patient. Remember that. For a day, if you can tide over the crisis and shift the patient, that saves a patient. So kindly, when you have a patient who is saturating at 75, in your dental chair, put him on oxygen. Put him on oxygen. He may save. Young patients, sometimes till you find a bed.
Okay.
The big one, D-type cylinders, what we use in the hospital is about 7,000 liters.
Okay. Okay.
Yours should be the smaller ones. If my memory serves me right, must be around 1,000 liters. If you are giving 5 liters per minute, then you have to calculate into 1 hour into 24 hours, and you would know that by this time this oxygen cylinder is going to get over. And when you are giving oxygen, remember this, never ever target a saturation of more than 90. There is evidence to the effect that pushing the saturation more than 90 is not helpful. And we have to ration the oxygen. So anything saturation, what flow of oxygen maintains a saturation more than 90 is what you have to use. Am I clear on that? Okay. So these are some of the tests. Always, when somebody shows you a test, I would always recommend to look at the lymphocytes. If the lymphocytes are more than 1,000 and more than 20%, that means there is no immune suppression. Then look at ferritin and CRP. If the C-reactive protein is less than 20, 30, or ferritin is around 300, 400, there is no great immune dysregulation. And LDH, see, what I want you to understand is, when you look at a lymphocyte count, always look at, if the lymphocyte count is very, very low, that means the immune system is not capable of managing the virus. Then look at the ferritin and C-reactive protein. These two will tell whether there is a cytokine storm or not. If the values are very, very high, there is a immune dysregulation or misfiring immune system. Then if you look at the LDH, a high LDH shows that there is an ongoing lung cell injury. LDH is there in every cell, and the virus affects your lung cells. So when the LDH goes up, you also have to presume that there is an ongoing lung cell damage. Then D-dimer coagulopathy. So why it is important is because if the D-dimer is high, I would add up a low molecular weight heparin twice daily. If it is normal, I would give a single dose. I don't give a therapeutic dose. If the C-reactive protein and ferritin are very, very high, I would step up my steroids, or I would go for a IL-6 inhibitor. So when somebody is sick and if their ferritins and C-reactive proteins are normal, there is no need to give a lot of immunosuppressants. And as I've said, troponin T shows the cardiac involvement, and serum creatinine, as I've said, because of low fever and low fluid intake at home, we see a lot of patients coming with raised bun and creatinine. So you should advise patients to have an adequate amount of fluid. And this is the X-ray scoring. It is there in the web. I have put it across, and I am going to share these slides with the moderators, so it can be given so that you can sit and see. When you see a chest X-ray, how to score, how to know that the scoring is poor or there is a improvement. And always remember this: when you are tracking serial X-rays, serial blood, the trend is your friend. If there is a trend which is going down, you know the patient is not doing well. So always when you do a repeat blood test or a chest X-ray, always compare and see whether it is going up or down. Always I say trend is your friend. So this is, I'm not going to go into the details. It is self-explanatory. The slides will be given to all the delegates. You can just check it up and learn. I have put 2-3 slides for also training. You can just go through this. CT scan scores are always given by the radiologist. It's not difficult. So anything 0 to 8, 9 to is mild, 9 to 15 is moderate, more than 16 is 18. In a study, it was proved if the score is more than 18, the mortality goes up. So if you are in a COVID care center in a dental college where I think probably you may require to start, My advice is always use the oxygen, keep the saturation more than 90 or 92. Don't try to push by increasing your oxygen. There is no benefit to the patient. Always give a dexamethasone 6 milligrams for 10 days. The alternate is methylprednisolone equivalent to 1 milligram per kg per day. The low molecular weight heparin 40 milligrams. If your D dimer is very, very high, you can give a BD dose. And if the patient has low lymphocyte count, to prevent secondary infections, you can start doxycycline. Other than this, there is absolutely no evidence for any other drugs. As I've said, for remdesivir, there is a small window I'll show you. And other than that, in a sicker patient, if the immune dysregulation is there, if the C-reactive proteins are more than 75, if your ferritins are more than 1000, probably a IL-6 inhibitor, tocilizumab, can be administered about 400 milligrams single dose. If there is a great improvement, you can repeat the dose after 12 to 24 hours. So in a COVID care center, if the patient is on 15 liters, I have said on 15 liters, you are giving almost 90% FiO2. And if the patient finds it difficult to breathe, if there is a decrease in his alarm markers, if the X-ray shows a deterioration, and clinically you feel that the patient is not breathing well, is putting it a lot of effort, and his respiratory rate is 25 or more, probably this patient requires to go to the hospital. So now two things I have discussed. One is at home, how to manage, and in the COVID care center, what are the three oxygen delivery devices that are you can use, and what is the flow rates, what is the FiO2, and how to assess what is the treatment in a COVID care center. Only 3 drugs. You don't require to look at any remdesivir or a IL-6 inhibitor. That has to be administered in a hospital, because a IL-6 inhibitor can suppress your immunity for a very, very long time. Secondary infections are very much possible. So we wouldn't advise anything other than these 3 drugs. And anybody you see with 15 liters, that means you have pushed the oxygen FiO2 to 90%, still not comfortable, still not saturating well, probably this patient requires to go to the hospital. And also the labs and X-rays show a deterioration. Definitely this patient has to be in a hospital setting. So this is the ordinal scale that we look at. So remdesivir has to be given only in an ordinal scale of 4 and 5. That means hospitalized with ongoing medical care or hospitalized with a supplementary oxygen. But anybody with high flow or NIV or a invasive ventilation and ECMO, the patient is too sick. The studies have proven that it doesn't work here. It is obvious, because it's an antiviral. You have to give it in an antiviral or a viral replication phase in the first 4 or 5 days or in the first week. Beyond that, when the immune dysregulation sets in, there is no point in trying to give remdesivir. At this point of time, only immune suppressants like dexamethasone, tocilizumab, or tumor necrosing factor inhibitors called baricitinib are to be used. These are some evidence to that, but that all happens in a hospital setting. We don't do that in a COVID care center. For all the dentists, Ayurvedic practitioners who are going to manage the home care and COVID care centers, always remember you have to work with only these 3 drugs: oxygen, dexamethasone, low molecular weight heparin. Everybody gets OD dose. If your D dimers are high, you can go for a BD dose, or you can consult an intensivist if you have any difficulty in disease, or doxycycline or any antibiotic to prevent secondary infection. And with this equipment also, on 15 liters, if somebody is not doing well, he requires to go to the hospital. This is what you have to remember when you are managing a COVID care center. So in the end, if you take a vaccine also, Dr. Rangnath is going to come back and teach you that we still can get infected, can be asymptomatic, and can be super spreaders. So always wear a face mask, even if you are vaccinated. And the hand wash, face and spacing has to be maintained till we control the pandemic. Thank you. Any questions? I would take it.
Thank you, Dr. Chandrasekhar, for this wonderful presentation. Very detailed and very easy to understand. I'm sure it would help a lot of us. I would request all participants to note down all the questions that they have in mind, so that they can present it to us at the end of the session. We also have planned a FAQ session So most of the questions would be answered in that automatically. If not, you are most free to air your questions at that point of time. For now, thank you, Dr. Chandrasekhar. I would now request Dr. Ramesh Masti to come and address the gathering.
Before Sir takes over the talk, I request, in case any students have registered, please kindly, because there are so many doctors who are in the line. In case by mistake any students have registered, please you can go out of login or log out and allow the other doctors who would like to attend this, because a lot of doctors are getting calls and messages they need to have, because it is the limit is 500. In case by mistake any students are there, kindly I request them to log out.
Thank you, sir. Good evening to one and all, and it was great to hear Dr. Chandrasekhar's lecture. Sir, can you stop your share screen, sir? I can.
Yeah. So sorry.
Thank you, sir. And also.
Yeah, I think I stopped it.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So my job is basically to tell about. I'll try to tell a little bit on home isolation. Now, we have this guidelines from the government of Karnataka, which talks about what one should do when a person is diagnosed. From our point of view, from what we have understood and a previous experience in the first wave, a lot of calls, the minute the patient is diagnosed with or comes to know that he's RT-PCR positive, he makes these calls to these BBMP helplines. And that is where they get a lot of pinched. So we require your support. I mean, at least a good many of you who can help us out in this particular activity. When you are there in this triage, you can inform them about what Sir just mentioned. But the first thing you need to tell them is to take care of, is to be calm. Because the fear of the disease is so much that itself is destroying half the people out there. And when the mental state is really bad, the body is also not in a state to physically recover fully. So if you can play a very important role as a counselor to people who are being diagnosed and calls you and call you up, I think you have done your job. What we need today in Bangalore or in Bangalore, because we are Bangalore specific here, is we need people who will answer their calls, speak to all their doubts and clarify them and tell them about to first ask them if they are if everything is fine, and if it is fine, then they can say yes, it is. I think I'm getting a lot of annotations being. I'll stop it. Okay. So basically, you need to inform the people who call us and tell them that ask them these three things which just Sir mentioned. If they don't have fever, if their oxygen saturation is fine, they can continue to remain at home. In the next 4 hours or 6 hours or 12 hours, when they stay back at home, they come out of the panic state and they start to relax a bit. And when they start to relax a bit, you can then, when they again call back to us again, we can then correctly guide them regarding what needs to be done and where they need to go. They need not have to come to the hospital the minute they are diagnosed. They can stay back at home for 1 or 2 days, provided all these parameters are normal. So if you people can play this important role of speaking to them and telling them that there's no need to panic and then wait, we will get back. These simple messages will play, will go a long way in bringing down the pandemic to a level where it is what it is now, because the people are bombarded with the the messages in the WhatsApp university, and unfortunately we really don't know whether they will believe the truth or whether they're going to believe the WhatsApp university. So in such sort of a scenario, if you can play this counseling role to a person who calls you up on the helpline, and then subsequently if you can tell them, if you can keep them calm for around 6 hours to 12 hours. And then if they will be in a better state of mind, then you can tell them to prepare, like what Sir said. First, ask them to see for these parameters. If those are normal, then you can ask them to continue to be in home quarantine. Supposing these things are not normal, then you have two options for them. One is the COVID care center, or the other one is the COVID hospital. Now, which of these two is dependent on the condition that they are. So our request is, if you can, if these people, the other request is, people speak different languages in Bangalore. So if we have people who can speak multiple languages, it's even more better. And the person is even more comfortable when he's speaking in that particular language. And the other thing that you can, we will try to share to you is the helpline numbers and nearby COVID care centers or the COVID hospitals that are available. And also the BBMP has come out with this bed availability. They have a website which tells you real time what exactly is the bed availability. So if you can help them in this, in finding the bed, especially if they require oxygen, or if you can tell them where the nearest COVID care provider is, or if you can tell them where the nearest COVID hospital is, if you know this particular information, that again will bring us, we'll be able to manage the load that is coming to the hospitals. What we are seeing in our medical college hospitals are people are just rushing in with no symptoms at all, but RT-PCR being positive. Now this is taking a huge amount of our time, and we are not, and they are forcing us to get, and they're also asking us to, they want to get admitted. So this can be avoided if we have a good tele-counseling or a tele-triaging, wherein you can speak to them, tell them about, you can, like what sir just presented, you can ask them all those questions, and based on that, you can tell them what is needed and what is needed. So from my side, I think I will stop here, and I will ask the next speaker to come in so that we can, in the end, take the questions. If there's, I'm sure there are a lot of questions from what I'm seeing in the chat box. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sir. I would now request Dr. Ranganath sir to kindly take the talk ahead.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. I'm Dr. Ranganath. I'm working as a nodal officer for the vaccination in a Victoria Hospital, Bangalore. Thank you for giving opportunity. As Dr. Chandrasekhar sir rightly said, now this pandemic is going on. To tackle this, one of the measure is, as a preventive medicine professor, I believe it is a vaccination. Vaccination is one of the main pillar in current pandemic as a silver line to end this game. So in this regard, I would like to share my experience as a vaccination nodal officer in a Victoria Hospital. We have done almost more than 17,000 vaccinations, jobs for the public as well as healthcare workers and other things. A lot of people are coming with the different queries. I have an infection and I'm working in the COVID war room duty and all. So I got infected, and after how many days I'm getting get vaccine, and which vaccine is better. So many queries will be coming. I'll discuss later. But as of now, the vaccine available in Bangalore and outside is, I believe it is only Covaxin and Covishield. I think as we all know, both are very effective in reducing the severity of infection. Of course, we may get infection, but severity will be very less, as we all know. The vaccination mainly, and earlier, in my center, what I did was, now, most of these medical colleges as well as dental colleges, they are doing vaccination part. My advice to all the people who are running the vaccination center is, we may get away, see, we are running the vaccination center, in that when the beneficiaries, when they come to this, the vaccine, we should try to avoid touching any of those documents, like either mobile or their Aadhaar card or something like this. They will come for this for during vaccination registration. So to avoid all those things, I made a QR code. So I put this My Victoria Hospital Vaccination Center QR code. So when the person get into this My Hospital to get the vaccine, so they will scan the QR code. I'll put one of my assistant to assist them regarding how to scan the QR code, and there are 5 questions: their name, age, their Aadhaar number, other thing. They will enter it, so that will come to the My system. And I will, when second step is when the person come to my desk, so I'll say, what is your name? He says his name, so it is vaccinated. So then I go to the next page, next center. He will get put one signature as a authority to get the signature, and whatever the desired vaccine, first dose or second dose, Covax, Covishield, he will get it, and he will go to the observation room, and he will stay for 20-30 minutes, and he will go up. So this will avoid the queue as well as the contact for the vaccination faculty and other things. It's working very well. Of course, there are challenges like some of the people who don't have scanner, I don't have such pen, something like this. In such case, our own assistant, they will help them. So till that, it's working very well. That is one part regarding the vaccination. I have done more than 17,000 jobs, and AEFI's reporting is very minimal, maybe except many of my doctor colleagues, whether a dentist or postgraduate, other thing, they said maybe very few. I put the one dedicated telephone, mobile phone exclusive for that. Hardly I would get this call. There is nobody call regarding the severe AEFI. I do got this. Some of them, they said, yeah, there is a small swelling or abscess in that area. There is small redness, itching. We got very less, very minimal. I'll not say no AFI, but there are very minimal. But they said, and that was disappeared after a day or two with a local symptomatic treatment. Otherwise, we are running this vaccination very successfully, just like any other medical college. We are also doing this. It is about 17,000. It's crossing, and maybe both are effective, but still in my center, I observed that after our chief minister as well as our health minister taken this COVAX, so it is becoming brand, and I believe that same is going everywhere. So people are demanding only the COVAX, Covishield, very less, but both are effective. So this is what I would like to share my experience, and whatever the questions, queries in the chat box, I will ready to take this. Thank you for giving opportunity, madam. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rangnath, for your nice, simple presentation. I'm sure you'll have quite a few questions at the end of the session. I now call upon Dr. Nagesh to come and give his talk to the gathering.
Sorry to
interrupt. Good evening, everyone.
Sorry
I
to
think
interrupt.
most of, yeah, please go ahead.
People who are just an announcement that are opening for the attendance to join in. So if anybody interested and who could not join can join now. Because the interesting part would be the question and answer session, and they will surely make some benefit out of it. Thank you. Dr. Nagesh, continue, sir.
Good evening. Thank you very much. I'll not be putting up my slides because most of the things have already been discussed. I think I would like to add 3-4 points before we open up for question answers. It would be interesting, I think, for us to answer questions of various of yours, because there are a lot of confusion existing in society regarding COVID, vaccination, isolation, etc., and who should be sent to COVID care and all that. So a few things I would like to add up here. Now in this second wave, in the new strain, a lot of people present with symptoms, and at least some of them are RT-PCR negative, and they think that they're negative. And now we have been seeing in those patients in whom symptoms are persisting, when we take them to a CT scan and screen their chest, and we see COVID signs on the CT scan. So I think though RT-PCR is negative and you have symptoms, I think it is better, wise to start the treatment. And then if symptoms worsen, getting a CAT scan or redoing the test is very useful. Always you keep in mind, we need to evaluate this based on symptoms, COVID test, and radiology. These 3 things. This is one important point I would like to bring in here. And the second point, I would have, being a GI surgeon, gastroenterologist, what we have noticed is, this is a pandemic. Remember, this is a pandemic. Any symptom, your first attribution should be towards the pandemic, and you should get your COVID test done. Now we are seeing a lot of patients being presented with fever, chills, and diarrhea and vomiting, and loss of appetite, loss of smell, loss of taste. These are the GI symptoms which come in. Of course, if there is loss of taste and loss of smell, we all know based on our first cycle experience, it is COVID. And this cycle, we see a lot of patients with diarrhea, fever, and chills. I think the first thing, apart from taking general treatment for your diarrhea and all that, you should also make it a point to test these patients. I mean, they might be your relatives, neighbors, whatever. I think by being in the midst of the pandemic, I think we need to do RT-PCR in these situations. At least 20%, 10 to 20% of them would be positive. And if you don't check on them, they would be super spreaders in the society. And of course, when you all in the COVID care center or whatever, as Dr. Chandrasekhar mentioned, there are a lot of people who say my morning saturation was 96 and evening it is 91. We hear a lot of, a simple thing would be to switch on your equipment again and then check it, or change the battery and check it. And panic, patients getting panic attacks during this situation would also bring down their oxidation saturation level by a couple of percentage points. And second thing is, I don't know, experts should advise this. We see a lot of families getting admitted. 80%, I think they are asymptomatic, as Dr. Chandrasekhar mentioned. A lot of families are getting admitted. A lot of families are going into ventilators. We don't know if there is a trait in that direction. I think other respiratory experts and then Dr. Chandrasekhar would address these questions. So once again, I reiterate, this is a pandemic. Any symptom, anything should first be attributed to pandemic. That's the importance in this pandemic. Of course, I think we should allow you all to ask questions to handle COVID care centers or handle any of your relatives, handle your surroundings in this situation. Keep distance. Your mask is the best vaccine, and sanitizer is the second best vaccine apart from social distancing. And kindly vaccinate, because of course, vaccine will not prevent you from getting COVID. Vaccine will not prevent you from spreading COVID. You can see the difference between the first wave and second wave. First wave, there was a lot of mortality in the frontline workers and health doctors and paramedics. That is not seen in the second wave. You can also see the visuals of we being in less PPIs compared to the first one, and less covered compared to the first one. Still, the mortality has come down. I think that is because of vaccination, and vaccination is an important part of this fight against COVID. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nagesh. Will we have a FAQ session also now, sir, for the benefit of our participants?
I think it's better.
Yes.
Half of the questions should, because we have so many participants.
Yes.
We don't think we can answer all the questions of participants. So if FAQs run through, half of them will be filtered, I believe.
Yes. Dr. Chandrasekhar, if I could request you to let us know about some frequently asked questions that you come across. Like Dr. Nagesh said, it would really filter many of the questions from the participants. And even after that, if there are some questions unanswered, I'm sure we could put them across to one of you people.
Is Dr. Mehta here? Okay, I think one of us can, what we can do is I can ask a few FAQs on behalf of Dr. Mehta, and then I think Dr. Chandrasekhar can start answering them. So would that be fine, or Dr. Chandrasekhar
Yes,
can
I think that will be perfect.
I think we can open the session for questions, sir, so that once they ask, if anything is left out in the end, I'll try to cover it. Hello? Am I audible, sir?
Yeah. I think, yeah, even that is good enough.
Yes, sir. Dr. Veena, if you could request our Dr. Preeti and Sindhura to allow people to be unmuted so that they can ask some questions.
Yes, sir.
There is a question asking for any difference for asymptomatic patients isolation. It's whether patient is symptomatic or asymptomatic, isolation is for 10 days and 7 days home quarantine. In fact, asymptomatic patients are very kind of mobile carriers. They tend to, if you allow them to go out, they are going to spread the infection. Anybody who is symptomatic, till he becomes not infective to the others, he has to be at home. That's the bottom line.
Sir, with senior citizens like above 70 years and having comorbidities like hypertension and diabetes, insulin-dependent diabetes, is it if they are mild cases, asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic, and sorry, if the oxygen saturation is above 95, can they be on home quarantine still?
Yeah, now they are not insisting that elderly people go to the hospital. Anybody, any age, any comorbidity, if the saturations are more than 95, can stay at home.
Okay.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes.
Sir, if a person is diagnosed COVID positive after 10 days after symptoms, and should he be put on prednisolone or and other drugs? If a senior citizen after 60 years, and if he is diagnosed with, if he has got a positive report, should he be given anticoagulants and prednisolone and all those drugs?
Anybody in home care is not to be given steroids or anticoagulants or low molecular weight appearance. Those two drugs are to be in COVID care center or in the hospital. As I said, if you find somebody who is dropping saturation on 6-7 day from 97 to 94, very comfortable, you do the blood test, C-reactive protein is slightly on the higher side, ferritin is on the higher side. Patient, you can give a dexamethasone 6 milligrams for 10 days.
If he is a diabetic?
Diabetic patients probably, diabetic patients have been given. All diabetic patients who are admitted with on oxygen have been put. The only problem is sugar start going up and down, requires little more care on the anti-diabetic drugs or adding up a short-acting insulin for about 4 or 5 days. But we have never found
They should be on a sliding scale, right?
Whatever. Sometimes at home we have increased the oral anti-diabetic drugs and they've managed quite well. Something around 220, 230, 250, we are okay. Unless the sugars go very high to 300, 400, we tend to worry. Because we know that we are giving steroids, anything between 250, we just hold it there.
So the bottom line is, if the patient is asymptomatic or there is no other issues, then we can just control them with dolo, and then nothing else is required.
Yeah, if you give in a viral replication phase in the first 4 days, if you give a steroid, it may increase the viral load. The virus may become more dominant. You are suppressing the immunity, isn't it?
Okay.
You should not give, actually.
Somebody has asked.
Good evening, sir. Yes. I am Dr. Sodi. So I am Dr. Sodi from Punjab, all the way. Congratulations for this excellent presentation by all the presenters. I have one question. Please throw some light on the oral manifestations in the COVID patients, apart from taste and some mucormycosis cases I'm getting, but some ulcerous cases are asked.
It has been published in the literature that patient have some ulcers. Most of it respond well to the steroids, or most of them do well with without much medication. About 4 or 5 days they settle down. I have seen thrice that patients presented oral ulcers. It doesn't require anything, sir. Just symptomatic treatment. What you would give something. Symptomatic. Yeah, they do well. And they don't require to be treated.
And this mucormycosis fungal is most of the time post-COVID.
Yeah, that is because of immunosuppression. Lot of IL-6 inhibitors, too much steroids.
Because of that.
Yeah, patients per se sometimes have very low lymphocyte count. Sometimes I've seen lymphocyte count of 4%. So they are more prone. So in that cases, sometimes we tend to keep them under observation because they're prone for infections, both bacterial and fungal infections. In some centers, without great evidence, they are putting some prophylactic antifungals also. With the lymphocyte counts very low, diabetics on long-term steroids and all are being sent home with an antifungal and antibiotic dose for till the.
According to you, there is any role of prophylactic ivermectin or erythromycin? Any prophylactic?
Sir, ivermectin doses having antiviral effect is almost 3 to 4 times of what we give. The what dose we are giving in India is not an antiviral dose. Antiviral doses are very, very high and they are toxic. And there is no great evidence, and all the NIH guidelines from USA, the European guidelines don't even mention the drug. Both favipiravir and
Excellent,
ivermectin.
excellent. Yes, this was a real confusion. Really wanted to share with everyone, because this is something spreading. It should be shared. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, sir. Good evening. Good evening, sir.
Yes, sir.
Hello, sir. I have a question, sir. Which day we should count the timeline? Which symptom we should give importance, sir?
Most of the common symptoms is fever, body aches, cough, fatigue. These are the common symptoms. Most of them present with. Especially elderly sometimes present with GI symptoms very commonly. As Dr. Nagesh said, sometimes they present with GI symptoms and atypical symptoms, but most of them present with fever, cough, and fatigue. So on the day fever starts, you can take from that day as day one.
Excuse me, sir. COVID is any other viral infection. I would like to, before any question, COVID is any other viral infection from the coronavirus family, which is existing for centuries. The main thing here worrisome is respiratory symptoms, which causes mortality. Any other symptom, any other organ being affected other than respiratory symptom would not be usually life-threatening. I think that's why all the focus and management is directed towards respiratory complications of COVID infection.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
What is the role of Fabiflu?
I told you, no, there is no great evidence for favipiravir. It is being given because it's an antiviral, but no major guidelines that have been published by the Infectious Disease Society of America or the NIH guidelines or the European guidelines don't even mention. There is no great evidence to that effect. But people do prescribe, but there is no evidence to that it is going to really decrease the viral replication.
Is it safe for home isolation patients?
I told it is not a drug which is showing any efficacy. Beyond that, if somebody is using, it's not a very toxic drug. People
harmless.
Harmless.
It's harmless.
Hello.
But there is no evidence that it is going to decrease the progression of the viral.
Sir, can we reduce the viral load in the air with ultraviolet radiation?
Thank you, sir.
There has been some publications where they have looked at cleaning the mass and all, there is some decrease in the viral load when the instruments and these things have been kept under. But the overall bottom line is we are not very sure that the instrument or a mask is totally clear of COVID.
Excuse me, sir. Is there?
Sir, 1 second before.
So what is the role of doxycycline?
So I went through the questions in the chat box. Yes. I think most of that will be answered by the PPT which sir will be sharing, which he has told he would be sharing.
I've already sent it.
Yes, sir. So these are the most of the questions are repetitive. I think the next question by Dr. Role of doxycycline also was covered by Doctor. So we can go to some questions which is non-repetitive. And here one of the doctor has asked that patient who has already completed a course of azithromycin and has still sore throat, can he or she take doxycycline?
Emergency management. Sean sir will group share.
If the symptoms persist and if the patient has fever, I would add an antibiotic. Any second antibiotic for me would be if I feel there is an infection. I would look at the immune status of the patient. If the lymphocyte count is low, then if the immune system, then I may add up. But just because somebody has a sore throat, I don't put a second antibiotic.
No, the concept of antibiotic in COVID infection is to prevent secondary infection.
And
so the concept of antibiotic in COVID infection is to prevent secondary lung infection, primarily to treat the COVID.
Excuse me, sir.
Sir, please tell us about reducing viral load in the air, sir. Only reason that we are getting infected, people are getting infected with viral load in the air. How to overcome that?
I think my friends from preventive department has to take that question. Dr. Rangnath.
The role of ionizer, the negative.
Sir,
can you tell?
Rangnath, sir.
If Dr. Rangnath is not there, can Dr. Ramesh take this question, sir?
So if I understood right, the question is on how do you reduce the viral load the virus in the air? What was the question, sir? Can they?
Aerosol spread in the air.
I think we all are aware of avoid the 3 C's. So we have to avoid crowds, we have to avoid close gatherings, and we have to avoid closed spaces. So in a COVID care or in a home isolation, see, the problem with home isolation when you get calls is how can you do a home isolation in a slum? It is next to impossible because they will have only one room or the maximum 2 rooms. So we just completed one study in these slums where we realized that what they do is they put that person in one room and the remaining all shift outside the house, or some of them stay in the kitchen, or they make this person stay in the kitchen. What we advise is to reduce the load of viruses, keep the windows open as much as possible, keep the doors open as much as possible, and avoid avoid AC rooms. That is something which we definitely recommend. This is the only way you can avoid viral load. If you're looking at equipments or instruments that are available, we don't have something which is very effective, though we have seen something which there are some which claim that they can bring it down. But the simplest, cheapest, most effective is cross ventilation, doors and windows being open, and avoid yourself from being in closed, confined spaces. And those especially living in very crowded places like slums, if they can, like Dr. Nagesh has mentioned, if everyone can wear a mask, that is more than sufficient. There is no other.
Sir, people are using ultraviolet radiations, that is UVC radiations, and HEPA filters as a room filter. So is that okay to use that?
I mean, if you have the money and means, you can as well try it out, sir. But there's no harm in trying it out. There's no harm in trying out. But I would still suggest the biggest. That is good for in hospital settings or in closed settings like in OT theaters or in wherein you don't have the option of a window. But in a home setting where we are looking at, or in a clinic setting, if you have it, you can use it. But I would still suggest ventilation. This is the best, most effective. Because the problem with these, they all have a lifespan. They all have maintenance issues. You see, cars are coming out saying that it kills the virus, but it gets clogged within 2 months of using or 3 months of using. The entire system gets clogged. It requires regular maintenance. All these issues matter.
If somebody wants their dental clinic to have less.
So one more question is.
COVID load, our advice is open up all the windows, have about 12 air changers, your viral load comes down. That's the only thing. Putting up AC, the virus goes and sits in the AC filter and it can start pumping, as doctor said. So our advice is open up all the windows, don't switch on the AC. If there is a good air circulation, your viral load in your clinics will come down.
Excuse me, sir, because nowadays we are hearing.
No, I think you all type the questions.
Please, 1 second. Hold on. I request all the participants.
Sir, there's one
the
more
questions
question.
Some more questions. Some important questions are already in the chat box. Where the Veena or Dr. Krishna will take up those questions, which are important. And one more thing for the panelist, I request here is, sir. No doubt there'll be a lot of questions on individual to individual basis. Today we had a platform with the concept of, as all medical doctors have been in short of hands, they're totally all hospitals filled, no helping hand for you. So as today platform is, all our dentists and Ayurveda doctors who are in huge number in participation here would like to help, be a helping hand for you people. And how do we go about this in simple stages, in critical stages, or in consultation? These are the things which today's because otherwise this question of COVID and how to treat and how to go about it keeps going on throughout night. As I saw a few important questions I have told Dr. Veena and Dr. Krishna will address. But remember, all the participants here, the platform here is how do we help our medical fraternity? In what way we as a dentist and we as a Ayurveda doctors be an helping hand to our medical fraternity? Maybe it's a telemedicine, maybe a vaccination drive, or however, whatever, because the whole panelists are there, whom I request how simplify you can make this so that your hands, even I have seen some medicine people can't receive calls to tell because with their PP kits, they're not able to receive their calls and to tell what needs to be done. So this platform is basically how do we, because a lot of cases and more cases are happening. So with this idea, I would request the panelists and the participants to take this discussion in a fruitful way.
Excuse me, sir.
I have
with having allopathy medicines as a supportive base in the home quarantine, why can't we try allopathy Ayurvedic medicines also in support of allopathy, sir?
See, anything.
Yeah. Please go
ahead. Go ahead. See, anything can be started. The problem here is most of the treatment, one thing you remember, most of the treatment, as Dr. Chandrasekhar mentioned, it's all symptomatic. Even the later intensive care and all what we do, it is all anti-inflammatory treatment we are giving throughout. It's a viral disease, no specific treatment as such. Just to beat the inflammatory levels, inflammatory cascade, we are treating these patients. So honestly speaking, we don't have any evidence for any particular drug. Maybe it's allopathy, Ayurveda, all these things. They're all just specific point of time, and still it needs to be researched. Once some are getting well, asymptomatic, we don't know what is working, what is not working.
But most of the patients home quarantine, I have noticed, are saying that they are drinking some kashaya. We are not saying that's not to be. We do encourage that. That in fact, Indian government also has put up some list of immunity boosting natural elements. We are not saying anything to that. We do encourage patients to do all that and keep their immunity up.
True.
I have one very commonly asked question. Considering the oxygen deficiency that everyone is facing, there have been a lot of messages now doing the rounds about these proning exercises. So a lot of people have been asking about how effective are these proning exercises, if it can be done until they get a oxygen cylinder or supply of oxygen for themselves.
Sir, proning definitely will improve the oxygen for a while, but we are to the understanding that it may not really affect the disease progression. But as you said, as a stopgap, or if somebody from 96 drops to 94 on proning develops, comes back to 96, we would encourage every patient who is in home care can go for prone with prone sleeping for about 2 to 3 hours, or as long as they tolerate. Or if somebody is not able to tolerate proning, side sleeping for a 1 hour also is to be encouraged. There is no harm in that, and that does help to improve the oxygenation.
So one more question from my end.
Yeah. Yes, go ahead, ma'am.
So one more question from my end. As a part of the teletriaging, I now have a new symptom of conjunctivitis, which is coming up.
Yeah.
So I don't have much knowledge about. Can you just help me with this?
I have not seen, but I've seen few reports that conjunctival involvement also like a oral mucosa, but most of them do settle on their own, or probably with the therapy that the anti-inflammatory therapy, they do settle, ma'am. Nothing in particular. The only thing that what we would advise is to prevent secondary infection, because there is a breakage with some antibiotic. I'm not very sure, ma'am, about that. I think ophthalmologist, or I'll try to check it and put it in the group, ma'am. What is the update? I'm not very sure about it. I've seen one.
Thank you. It would be
but I'm not
help
sure.
because 2-3 patients started with this symptom, sir.
Yeah, I have also seen ones, but
So,
I when searched the literature. They said that it's a part of nothing has to be done. Generally settles on the own, settles on its own.
So they are asking how many days of infection can one take the vaccines?
The national guideline says 14 days post-infection, or if the first dose is done, the second dose can be done either 14 days or when it is there.
Okay.
If somebody,
If the guideline says it's 14 days, sir, after 14 days of the infection,
after
that you can take
clearing the infection, 2 weeks after clearing the infection. Dr. Rangnath or the PNSM people may know. Dr. Rangnath is there. Rangnath.
So as per the guidelines, it's about 14 days.
14 days post-infection or post-clearing the infection?
Post-recovery.
Post-recovery. And
sir, good evening, sir.
First dose, and the second dose is after 9 weeks. They go after 9 weeks only.
And can any doctors throw some light on medications after vaccination, especially for analgesics or any dental procedure or surgical procedures?
The vaccine, the post-vaccination, the management is we just got only the message as a pain at the site of injection. I think we just simply say about paracetamol, not even diclofenac, because after that a doctor incidents somewhere near Chennai. So what are the symptoms that? So we are not advising the diclofenac.
How long, sir?
Yeah,
how long?
Only that is sufficient.
So most of them may have for a day or two.
As long as they have symptoms, basically, as long it is just some people might have fever, pain at the site. It's only symptomatic. As long as you have symptoms, you can take that. Then you can stop. Yes. There is no fixed time frame for that.
Sir, because of the incident, most of us are confused whether to prescribe analgesics after the vaccination.
No, sir. The confusion is all about the confusion is all about IV diclofenac.
Okay.
The death of the doctor was attributed to IV diclofenac.
Orally doesn't matter.
Yeah, reports have shown that
it's a very rare
thing is a paracetamol is the best thing.
Okay. So after procedures, the regular medications or analgesics can be prescribed even after the vaccination.
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you, sir.
So there are few questions related to the vaccination, like after testing, 2 weeks, that is as of 14 weeks is fine. Then post-vaccination, there's just a few complaints of at the site of injection, there may be little pain, so it will stop for a day or two. That is not much complication. Then duration is for COVAX 28 days, Covishield is 2 months. So there are many like AIMS guidelines, so many things are there. But as the central government secretary Rajesh Bhushan says, 28 days and 2 months.
Hello.
And which vaccine is best? Hello. Both are best at 78%. They say both are. Third one is pregnant and lactating mother, still is not it. Only more than 18 years. So as a healthcare workers, we all doctors and dentists, we can take as a register, as a student, we can register till now through COVID app.
Hello.
And we cannot replace with the first dose and second dose. We have to take the same dose. Maybe earlier there was vaccine shortage. Maybe that was the hiccups. Now I think it is solved. So the vaccine is available to all. The first dose, after 28 days, they can take the second dose.
Hello.
Thank you.
Sir, if I could interrupt now and tell you all that, like we've had a lot of questions, varied questions. We are even trying to provide every participant with the email ID so that they can send us their questions and we can forward it to you for your consideration later. As a summary to all this, sir, if I could ask each one of the panelists to give the gathering here, dentists and Ayurvedic people, a take-home message of how to guide a lay person if they call us in simple point-wise pattern, maybe 1, 2, 3. This is what we need to do to guide them to the next step. It would be of great help as a take-home message, sir.
Yeah, definitely, sir. That is a required. We'll do it, sir.
Shall I go first?
And also, we would request
Sir,
Dr.
one
Ranganath
last
to help
question,
with
sir. Hello. So one last question, sir. What's your opinion about the recent drug Virafin, sir? Chandrasekhar, sir.
Drug? Come again?
Virafin, which has got a recent approval from this one. What is your opinion about that drug, sir?
Those drugs are all have to go onto randomized controlled trials, and it will take years for us to prove that. See, this viral infections and viral pneumonias we have been handling from 30 years. We don't have any antivirals to manage them, and this is not going to come now also. So it is mostly a symptomatic treatment, and any drug which comes, and then it has to go through a rigorous randomized controlled trials, and then to prove that it is really effective, this is going to take years. As of today, the kind of evidence that it is coming with is not to be advised.
Now, if I could request the panelists to give us a summary.
My take-home message is that 80 to 90% of the 85% of the COVID positive patients can be managed at home, and all of you can definitely manage it and decrease the load on it. The one thing that you have to monitor is oxygen saturation. If your oxygen saturation is more than 95 on room air, they are good to stay at home. And the only medication that you require to give is symptomatic. There is no specific medication as of today. On 7th or 8th day, if there is a dip in saturation, if you get any investigations done, there is a deterioration, you can add dexamethasone 6 milligrams OD. This is my advice to all the colleagues. And if there is any secondary infection or increase in the cough, an antibiotic to prevent secondary infection can be done. Other than that, there is no drugs that can be administered. There is no need to administer any other drugs at home. And in the COVID care center, I have said low oxygen, low molecular weight heparin, and steroids, and any antibiotic to prevent secondary infection. And if somebody on 15 liters not doing well, has to go to a hospital. This is the summary of my talk.
Coming to Virafil, somebody asked how potent is Virafil. It is the old existing drug. It's called pegylated interferon alpha 2B. The drug is already available, being used extensively for hepatitis C treatment. Basically, it is an antiviral. So generally being used on this virus too. Till, as Dr. Chandrasekhar said, till we get the detailed studies on this, we don't know how this antiviral will be used in this antiviral. Yeah, my take-home message here is, this is a pandemic. Any symptom, might be conjunctivitis, sore throat, respiratory, GI, whatever. Any symptom in this current scenario, treat it as COVID symptom and get tested early. The respiratory symptoms are very important. They are causing death to the patient. So they have been given more importance, and our focus is basically on treating them. Whenever you have a respiratory symptom, even with negative RT-PCR, try to reconfirm it. If they are not responding to your symptomatic therapy like Dolo or paracetamol or whatever, try to reconfirm that with your physician or with a CT scan, where you might get positive report in spite of repeated RT-PCR or RAT negative report. So this is a pandemic. Every symptom is a COVID symptom. Don't neglect it. If, as Dr. Chandrasekhar said, 8 to 12 days are very important. Presently, the basic problem for shortage of oxygen, shortage of remdesivir, shortage of bed, the main, you all are going to COVID care centers. You all are doctors. You have your neighbors. See, basic symptom usually starts on day 3 of infectivity or day 3 to 5 of infectivity. By the time you feel that the symptom is serious, you already entered day 6, day 7, and you give a RT-PCR test. And generally, because of the patient load, it is coming on day 8, day 9, day 10. By then, you are short of breath. You would have tried all your home medicines and all that. And by the time you register and get a BO number, it is day 12 and you're completely short of breath. And one bad notion among the public today is the saturation, oxygen saturation. Always remember, even in a normal individual, less than 90 is dangerous. Less than 70, they don't survive. People are going to hospital late, rushing to ventilators, rushing to oxygen, because they think out of 100%, 50% is normal. Out of 100%, 60% is normal. That is false. In terms of your oxygen saturation, anything less than 90 is alarming, dangerous, even out of COVID-19 situation. If your saturation, if a normal individual saturation is less than 95, if an asthmatic saturation is less than 92, 91, less than 90, you should be alarmed. You should seek the medical help. This is very important. Any small symptom, get yourself tested, start the treatment as Dr. Chandrasekhar mentioned. Most of you would avoid hospitalization, looking for beds, looking for injections. I think this is very important.
Thank you, Dr. Nagesh.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Ranganath, if you could give us your take-home message to all the dentists and the Ayurveda people assembled here, it would be of great help. Dr. Ranganath?
Dr. Ramesh sir can take over, sir.
My take-home message.
Ramesh sir?
My take-home message, as already I have mentioned, is we have to look at the mental health of the people who are getting positive, who are turning out to be positive. The fear of the disease is killing them more than the disease per se. If you can help us out in minimizing the fear of the disease by speaking to them about this knowledge that you have now, I think that will solve half the problem of the patients rushing to the hospitals and the problem of bed and other things. So please counsel them properly. And as far as possible, home quarantine, home isolation is sufficient for most of the people who are turning out to be positive. So mental health and stay calm is my message. Thank you.
My take-home message, an appeal to all my colleagues, medical, dental, everybody. Government of India has given the 2 excellent vaccines. They are highly effective. I request all my colleagues, please take the 2 doses of the scheduled vaccine, Covaxin or Covishield. It's very effective. Not only you, the people surrounding you. It may be your colleagues, it may be the maid which are working in your house or in your clinic. It is most important. You please motivate your colleagues as well as your maids or people are helping us. So that is because we believe they are the super spreaders. So please ask them to take the vaccine and extend your hand in maintaining this that COVID risk maintenance as a manpower shortage. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, all of you. I would now call upon our principal, Dr. Hemant, to propose the vote of thanks to the gathering and to the panelists of today's talk.
Thank you, Krishnanand. First and foremost, I'd like to thank all the eminent speakers for providing their valuable inputs regarding how non-medical people can join hands and support to our medical friends who are struggling day and night and providing treatment to these COVID patients. Our main concept of this was when I spoke to Devanandji or Karikat, they told a lot of hands are short, medical staff have been short. Why don't we do a telemedicine? But everyone were eager to do, but everyone wanted a basic knowledge and to go ahead with speaking to patients. And I think to an extent, with all the panelists here, especially starting from Chandrasekhar sir, Mehta sir, who was very busy, who accepted to be with us. Thank you, Mehta sir, for us being with us. Chandrasekhar for his in-depth presentation and giving all the highlights. And a very important thing, both the community medical people told, it's not just the drugs and other things. Mahesh sir clearly indicated that it's the psychological. Sometimes we just need to do teleconsultation is a psychological part also, which makes so many patients getting into panic, and so we can avoid these things. And also, again, Ranganath sir told he is very confident about his vaccination still. Yes, sir, a lot of people, our dental as well as Ayurveda people are in this vaccination drive. A lot of apartments we go, we give in huge numbers. This thing also is parallelly going. And again, I request all the eminent speakers today who spoke. Definitely, the take-home message was very clear. And still, what we request is, no doubt you have given all your presentations and all your paperwork. We again will sit with you people and simplify and circulate to all our dental doctors and Ayurveda doctors how this telephonic triage can help our patients in a very simpler way. Lastly, I would like to really my heartfelt thanks to all the participants. In a short of time, I just spoke to Devananji today morning. How do we go about this? How do we do? It's a good idea. You just go ahead. And then we, Doctors Nagesh and other Mehta sir and our Tejasvi Surya's personal secretary Arvindji also spoke, and we just took it and we confirmed with Mehtaji, and it took all just a 5 hours thing, and 500 people and more than that were people waiting to come. This is to show that all the medical fraternity doctors that we are all with you, sir. Anytime, any given time, anything from us, we are all there with you. So with these words, I thank all the participants for being so concerned to attend and at the same time being an helping hand to this medical staff. So we'll be coming out with more data and more simplified way of things to you. And this whole presentation is been recorded and it's been put in the, will be put within 2 days in the YouTube of Dayanand Sagar College YouTube. You can see, go through about all these things. And lastly, I would thank the whole volunteers who are involved in this, and my NMO team, Subhaya sir, Sanjay Subhaya sir, Akshay, Jitender, a lot of all other doctors. Sorry if I left out any name. I thank all the NMO team for working this, and we'll still strive hard and be in helping hand to our medical fraternity. Thank you. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you so much, Hemant sir. And thank you all participants and the panelists. Sir, hopefully with all these inputs, we would make sure the load on Dr. Ravindra Mehta sir, Dr. Chandrasekhar sir and Dr. Nagesh sir is reduced. And I think we'll collaborate much more with Ranganath sir and Ramesh sir to vaccinate more and more people and help reach out to many more, sir. I thank each panelist to have taken their precious time and have guided us through the most confusing topic. Hope this in-detail training has removed the barriers in the participants, and now they would be free to volunteer confidence and contribute to their bit to the corona war. So the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. With this saying, we would post a Google form in the chat box. Kindly fill in this. This is a volunteer group which is doing a great job. You can all volunteer for the teletriaging, for the task force, so many aspects of this, and help the needy. Thank you so much for being here. Each participants are valuable, and we would want all of you who have come here to be a part of this volunteer group. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Professor Hemant, Dr. Nagesh, Chandrasekhar, and all other doctors. Really, it was awesome experience. Fantastic presentation. I hope all the doctors got the level best knowledge today. It will be very useful in upcoming days. Thank you. This is Devanand from Samartha Bharata and RSS.
Oh, thank you all. Thank you, Krishnan. Thank you, Veena. Thank you. We can leave the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.